Today, we take a look at what unfolds when security cameras record animal attacks, from a wildlife sanctuary in central India, where a faulty gate would change everything, to a safari lodge in Botswana, where a guest walked straight toward death. But first, we begin in rural Vietnam, where a daily routine would turn fatal in seconds. It was March 19th, 2014, in a rural district of Quang Ninh Province, Vietnam, approximately 40 miles northeast of Ha Long Bay. The property sat at the end of a rutted dirt road, surrounded by rice paddies and dense secondary forest that concealed it from casual view. A low concrete structure with a corrugated metal roof housed what neighbors knew only as a small-scale animal operation. Tran Van Dung was a 47-year-old former construction worker who had operated the facility for nearly 12 years. He had transitioned into bear farming in the early 2000s after an injury ended his ability to perform heavy labor, purchasing his first 2 Asiatic black bears from a middleman with connections to the illegal wildlife trade. By 2014, his operation had grown to 7 bears, housed in a row of cramped metal cages inside the concrete building. The bears existed for a single purpose. Dung extracted bile from their gallbladders through crude catheters, selling the greenish fluid to buyers who believed it held medicinal properties. Vietnamese law had technically banned bile extraction in 2005, requiring all existing bears to be microchipped and registered while prohibiting new acquisitions. But enforcement was nearly non-existent in rural provinces. Inspectors visited perhaps once per year, and the property's isolation limited scrutiny. Enforcement depended largely on scheduled inspections rather than active monitoring, allowing unregistered activity to persist for years without meaningful intervention. His facility reflected years of corner cutting and neglect. The cages were not purpose-built. Dung had acquired second-hand steel frames and retrofitted hinged doors that swung outward into the aisle, secured by external drop-pin latches. The design allowed easier access for feeding and extraction, but created a critical vulnerability. A determined push from inside could stress the latch directly rather than pressing the door against a frame. The enclosures measured barely 3 feet wide by 5 feet long, forcing adult bears weighing over 250 pounds to exist in perpetual confinement, without room to stand fully upright or turn around. Rust had eaten through sections of the bars. The concrete floor was stained with years of accumulated waste, and the smell of ammonia and infection hung permanently in the humid air. Several bears showed visible signs of chronic stress and illness: patchy fur loss, overgrown claws curling back into their paw pads, and open sores around the permanent catheters inserted into their abdomens. Dung had installed a basic security camera system 6 months earlier, after a neighboring property reported theft. The system consisted of 2 cameras covering the entrance and the interior of the bear housing area, recording to a digital unit in his small office. The footage quality was poor, with grainy resolution and uneven lighting, but it provided a continuous fixed view of the interior during daylight hours. Dung followed a fixed daily routine that rarely varied. Feedings were done first, moving left to right down the row of cages, followed by basic cleaning and inspection of bars, doors, and feeding slots. Bile extraction occurred only on specific days and was avoided when inspectors were expected, but the same cages, latches, and restraint points were used regardless of the task. Over time, minor mechanical problems, sticky hinges, bent latch pins, misaligned doors, had become familiar enough to ignore. Dung adjusted by working more slowly and relying on habit rather than repairs, trusting that the equipment would hold as it always had before. The largest bear in the facility was a male Dung had acquired in 2008, estimated at approximately 15 years old and weighing close to 350 pounds, despite chronic malnutrition. The animal had arrived already showing signs of long-term psychological damage from previous captivity, and 6 additional years in Dung's care had worsened the condition. It paced constantly when awake, had worn raw patches into its muzzle from repetitive bar biting, and had broken several teeth attempting to chew through its cage. During feeding and extraction sessions, the bear frequently lunged at the door, striking the bars with its forelimbs. Dung had responded by shortening interactions and spacing out bile collection, rather than addressing the failing equipment or the animal's deteriorating condition. March 19th began as a routine morning. Dung's wife had left early to visit relatives in a nearby town, leaving him alone at the property. He entered the bear building at approximately 7:30 a.m. to begin the morning feeding, carrying a bucket of rice mixed with vegetable scraps. The interior camera later showed him moving along the row of cages, dumping portions through the feeding slots as the bears stirred, shifted, and vocalized. Asiatic black bears are medium-sized omnivores native to forested regions across South and East Asia. Adults typically weigh between 220 and 440 pounds, with males averaging significantly larger than females. They possess powerful forelimbs adapted for climbing and digging, with long curved claws capable of inflicting deep, tearing injuries. Their bite force, while lower than that of larger bear species, remains strong enough to fracture bone and cause catastrophic soft tissue damage. Asiatic black bears are involved in a disproportionate number of aggressive encounters with humans in their native range, and individuals subjected to prolonged confinement, chronic pain, and repeated invasive procedures are known to display unpredictable and explosive attack behavior. Documented attacks commonly involve a sudden rush, forceful body contact to knock a person down, and repeated clawing and biting directed at the head, neck, and upper body. The attack began when Dung reached the large male's cage. The security footage shows him setting down the bucket and reaching toward the door, apparently intending to check or adjust the latch. What followed unfolded in seconds. The cage door swung outward. Whether Dung had failed to seat the drop pin fully the night before, or whether years of corrosion had finally sheared the pin from its housing, could not be determined from the footage. The bear surged forward immediately, forcing its body through the opening before the door had fully cleared the frame. The impact drove Dung backward into the opposite row of cages. His head struck the metal bars, and he collapsed onto the concrete floor. The bear followed without hesitation, rearing over him and dropping its weight onto his upper body. On camera, the scene reduced to blurred motion and abrupt shifts in shadow as the animal's forelimbs raked downward. Dark staining appeared on the floor beneath Dung as his face and neck were struck repeatedly. Dung raised his arms instinctively. The bear clamped onto his right forearm, its jaws locking in place as it pulled backward. The limb twisted under the force, fracturing as muscle tore, and the arm was wrenched against the floor. Blood spread rapidly across the concrete beneath him, as major vessels were damaged and bleeding intensified. The bear released the arm and lunged upward again. Its head drove down toward Dung's face and throat, jaws closing across the upper head and neck area, while its forelimbs pinned his shoulders. The attack compressed the airway and caused severe facial and scalp injuries. After a brief involuntary movement of his legs, Dung ceased coordinated motion. The footage shows continued contact for a short period, with the bear alternating between brief bites and paw strikes. Then, abruptly, the animal stopped, its head lifted, nostrils flaring as it oriented toward the open cage behind it. The behavior was consistent with a stressed animal retreating to the only territory it recognized. The bear backed away from the body, turned, and moved into the cage, settling near the rear wall. The other bears vocalized from their enclosures throughout, their movement and noise echoing through the building. No further movement from Dung was visible. Dung's wife returned to the property at approximately 11:45 a.m. She found the bear building door open and heard unfamiliar sounds from inside. When she approached close enough to see into the doorway, she fled to a neighboring home and called for help. Authorities arrived roughly 90 minutes later, secured the animals, and recovered Dung's body, which was pronounced dead at the scene. Review of the security footage determined that equipment failure and unsafe handling practices caused the incident. All 7 bears were seized and transferred to a rescue facility. The property was condemned, and penalties were issued for the illegal operation. While Vietnam's illegal wildlife trade had claimed one of its own operators, thousands of miles away in central India, a legitimate rescue facility would soon show how vulnerable even trained professionals could be when safety systems failed. It was October 7, 2015, at a wildlife rescue center located in the forested highlands of Madhya Pradesh, India. The facility occupied 30 acres of fenced woodland, approximately 15 miles from the nearest town, operating as a sanctuary for big cats confiscated from illegal captivity, circuses, and failed breeding operations. Morning mist hung between the sal trees as the day shift prepared to begin. Anand Sharma was a 35-year-old senior animal keeper who had worked at the sanctuary for 11 years. He had joined as a general laborer and advanced through experience and consistency, becoming one of the facility's most trusted staff members. He lived in on-site housing with his wife and 2 young daughters, and routinely handled daily enclosure maintenance for several of the sanctuary's tigers. The facility housed 14 tigers across multiple enclosures, including elderly animals requiring ongoing medical care, and younger individuals still adapting after rescue from prolonged confinement. Standard operating procedures required 2 keepers for any task involving tiger enclosures, with 1 worker inside the habitat and a second positioned outside to monitor the animal's location and control access points. The sanctuary had operated for 9 years without a fatal incident. The enclosure system used a shift and lock design common in facilities housing dangerous animals. Each habitat connected to a smaller holding area through a heavy vertical guillotine-style shift gate. When properly secured, the system allowed staff to confine the animal to one section while entering the other for cleaning, feeding, or maintenance. The gate relied on a counterweight mechanism and a manually inserted securing pin intended to lock the gate fully into place. Daily work followed a predictable pattern. Keepers began by shifting animals into holding areas, then rotated through cleaning, water replacement, and inspection of enclosure hardware before feeding. Lock verification was normally done visually and by feel, rather than force testing, especially during routine tasks that had been performed hundreds of times before. When staffing was tight, partners frequently separated to cover multiple enclosures at once, relying on timing and habit rather than continuous visual confirmation. These adjustments were unofficial but common, viewed as manageable risks in a facility that had gone years without a serious incident. Familiarity reduced caution. Lock checks were often visual rather than force tested, and routine tasks were treated as low risk because outcomes had remained predictable. The absence of prior incidents reinforced confidence in systems that were gradually deteriorating. Anand's assignment that morning involved cleaning the main enclosure of a 12-year-old male Bengal tiger named Karan. The animal had been rescued 3 years earlier from a private collection, where he had been kept in poor conditions. Since arriving at the sanctuary, Karan had shown stable behavior and adjusted well to routine care. He weighed approximately 485 pounds and measured close to 10 feet from nose to tail. Staff records noted occasional territorial displays, but no prior physical contact with keepers. The morning routine proceeded normally. Anand's partner, a junior keeper named Vikram Patel, age 24, assisted in shifting Karan into the holding area at approximately 8:15 a.m. Vikram operated the gate controls while Anand visually confirmed the tiger's position. The gate dropped into place, and the securing pin was inserted. What neither keeper could see was that the gate's internal locking mechanism had developed a fault. Maintenance logs later showed that intermittent problems with the same gate had been reported 6 weeks earlier, including instances where the securing pin appeared seated from the exterior but failed to engage fully with the internal catch. Repairs had been delayed due to staffing and budget limitations. Vikram left to assist with feeding preparations elsewhere in the facility, leaving Anand to complete the cleaning alone. This departure represented a deviation from strict two-person protocol, though such adjustments were not uncommon when staffing levels were strained. A fixed security camera mounted near the enclosure entrance recorded the area as part of routine monitoring. Anand entered the main enclosure at approximately 8:25 a.m., carrying cleaning tools and a bucket of disinfectant solution. The enclosure covered roughly 12,000 square feet and included natural vegetation, a small pond, and several enrichment structures. The holding area remained separated by the guillotine gate, which appeared secure. Bengal tigers are among the largest of the big cats, with adult males commonly weighing between 400 and 570 pounds. They possess immense strength, capable of overpowering large prey, and use powerful forelimbs and long canine teeth during attacks. Tigers typically strike from behind or the side, aiming for the neck and upper body, using crushing force and prolonged pressure rather than rapid shaking. Once prey ceases movement, tigers commonly release and withdraw rather than continuing to attack. Even animals accustomed to routine human presence retain full predatory capacity, and serious incidents in managed facilities most often result from equipment failure or procedural lapses. Approximately 12 minutes into the task, movement appeared near the holding area. The security footage later showed subtle displacement of the gate, followed by a sudden upward shift. Investigators would determine that pressure from inside the holding area caused the improperly engaged pin to slip free. The gate rose enough for the tiger to force his way through. Karan crossed the enclosure in seconds. Anand began to turn, but the distance closed before he could react. The tiger struck from behind and slightly to the side, the force driving Anand forward onto the ground. Karan immediately pinned him with his forelimbs, pressing his weight down across the upper torso. The first bite closed across the back and side of Anand's neck, crushing muscle and blood vessels as the animal maintained pressure. The injury was immediately disabling. The combination of neck compression, vascular damage, and restricted airflow caused Anand to lose consciousness rapidly. His body went slack beneath the tiger's weight as Karan held position, maintaining contact as he would with subdued prey. The camera recorded the tiger remaining over the body for a short period before releasing his grip. Once Anand's body had gone completely still, Karan's predatory sequence concluded. The tiger released, stepped back, and moved several feet away before settling within the enclosure. Blood spread beneath Anand on the ground. No further movement from Anand was visible. Vikram returned at approximately 8:50 a.m. and immediately noticed the open gate and Karan outside the holding area. He activated the emergency alarm and radioed for assistance without approaching the enclosure. Staff secured the perimeter while tranquilization equipment was prepared. It took nearly 20 minutes to safely sedate the tiger and confirm he was fully immobilized before entry. Anand was found deceased, with severe injuries to the neck and upper body consistent with a tiger attack. The security footage was collected for review. The investigation identified failure of the gate locking mechanism as the primary cause, with delayed maintenance and deviation from two-person protocol contributing to the fatal outcome. The sanctuary suspended operations for 2 weeks to inspect and repair all enclosure systems and instituted mandatory lock verification and a strict ban on single-keeper entry into big cat habitats. Anand Sharma's death was recorded as a workplace fatality. His family received compensation, and a small memorial was later placed near the sanctuary entrance. While Central India had lost a seasoned professional to mechanical failure and institutional oversight, thousands of miles away, a very different setting would soon show how quickly poor judgment could erase the distance between comfort and danger. It was November 12, 2017, at an upscale safari lodge situated along a seasonal floodplain in Botswana's Okavango Delta. The property featured 12 luxury tents arranged along a wooded ridge overlooking open grassland, with a central dining area, fire pit, and elevated walkways connecting guest accommodations. The lodge operated unfenced by design, allowing wildlife to move freely through the grounds, as they had long before permanent structures existed. Derek Holloway was a 41-year-old regional sales manager from Birmingham, England, visiting the lodge as part of a company incentive trip. The all-expenses-paid safari rewarded top performers, and Derek had qualified after exceeding annual sales targets for a second consecutive year. Other guests described him as outgoing and confident, though staff noted a tendency to dismiss instructions he found restrictive. During his stay, Derek established a consistent pattern. He drank heavily at meals and late into the evening, taking advantage of the lodge's open bar. He treated safety briefings lightly, joking about overly cautious guides, and had twice attempted to step beyond designated viewing areas during game drives to photograph animals at closer range, requiring staff intervention. On his second evening, a guide specifically warned the group about a breeding herd of elephants moving through the area and emphasized that guests should remain on lit walkways after dark and request escorts when traveling between tents and common areas. The lodge's safety procedures were explicit. Guests were informed during orientation that large animals regularly moved through the unfenced grounds at night, and that they should remain on illuminated paths and request escorts after sunset. Each tent was equipped with a small emergency air horn. November brought warm nights and increased wildlife activity as animals concentrated near permanent water. Staff had observed elephant movement near the eastern boundary on several consecutive evenings, including a large bull frequently grazing within a few hundred yards of the tents. The animal showed no overt aggression, but also little avoidance of the lodge's presence. Guides noted that bulls passing through the floodplain often followed the same routes night after night. Familiarity with the lodge reduced flight behavior, but did not reduce risk, especially when animals were approached outside established buffer distances. The floodplain terrain amplified risk after dark. Low scrub and uneven ground limited sightlines beyond the illuminated paths, and the absence of fencing meant animals could appear without warning from multiple directions. Guides routinely emphasized that distance, not visibility, was the primary safety buffer at night. The evening of November 12th progressed normally through dinner. Derek consumed alcohol steadily between the afternoon game drive and the end of the meal, continuing to drink at the fire pit as other guests retired. By 10:30 p.m., only Derek and 2 staff members remained in the common area. One staff member later reported offering to escort him to his tent, which he declined. Security cameras monitored the main common areas, walkways, and entrance points, recording continuously to a digital unit in the manager's office. The system was intended for general security and staff oversight rather than detailed monitoring of guest behavior. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Derek left the fire pit and walked alone along the illuminated pathway toward his tent. The route passed within 50 yards of the unfenced eastern boundary, where dense bush began. He stopped partway along the path. The night was clear, with a waxing gibbous moon casting pale light across the open ground beyond the pathway. The camera footage later showed him turning toward the darkness beyond the lights. A large shape stood near the edge of the illuminated area, roughly 40 yards away. The outline of a bull elephant was visible where the pathway lights met the moonlit grassland, its slow movement and massive silhouette unmistakable even in the grainy recording. Derek stepped off the pathway and walked toward the animal. His phone was in his hand, its screen lit as he approached. He covered approximately 15 yards, moving well beyond the designated safe zone. African bush elephants are the largest land animals, with adult bulls commonly weighing over 10,000 1,000 pounds. Despite their mass, they can accelerate rapidly and reach high speeds over short distances. Elephants signal discomfort through a sequence of warning behaviors, including ear spreading, head elevation, foot stamping, trunk movements, and short mock charges intended to drive threats away. When these signals fail, a full charge may follow, and the resulting impact and trampling can cause fatal crushing injuries within seconds. The elephant's first warning was visible on the footage. The animal spread its ears and raised its head. Derek continued forward, closing the distance to roughly 25 yards. The elephant stamped once and swung its trunk. Derek paused briefly, then raised his phone and activated its flashlight, directing the beam toward the animal. The elephant surged forward in a short burst and stopped, a classic mock charge. The warning was clear, and the animal held its ground momentarily. Derek did not retreat. He remained where he stood, phone still raised. Moments later, the elephant's posture changed. Its ears folded back, head lowered, and trunk curled inward. Derek turned to run. The elephant accelerated. The camera captured the collision only as a sudden blur, as the animal struck Derek and continued forward. His body was knocked to the ground and rolled out of the illuminated area as the elephant moved through. Subsequent footage showed the elephant continuing on its path and disappearing into the darkness beyond the camera's range. Derek did not rise or move. Staff were alerted shortly afterward when a security officer conducting a routine review of the monitoring feed noticed the incident and activated emergency procedures. They reached the area and found Derek lying beyond the pathway with extensive injuries. He showed no signs of responsiveness. Wildlife authorities and local police were notified immediately. Derek's body was recovered at first light. Officials determined he had died from severe blunt force injuries sustained during the elephant encounter. Toxicology testing later confirmed a high level of alcohol in his system. The elephant was not pursued, as authorities determined the incident resulted from a close approach and sustained provocation. The lodge briefly suspended operations to review safety measures, adding mandatory escorts after dark, limits on evening alcohol service, and tighter monitoring of guest movement. The three incidents shared no location, no species, and no common setting beyond the presence of systems designed to observe human error. In each case, the decisive moment occurred not when an animal acted, but when a person crossed a boundary they had been warned not to approach. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.